Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome to my first card in my video series, One Die 4 Ways. I'll be using this Wandering Vine die by Memory Box 4 weeks in a row, every Friday in a different way. Here's the card for today. You can see I did an inlay and my backgrounds are colored and embossed and the actual die cut is still white. So here is the die. It's actually called Wandering Vine Squares. And for this card, what I'm going to do is take 2 pieces of Neenah Solar white cardstock. This is just an A2 size. And I'm going to put a lot of ATG tape runner because I want to adhere these two together because I'm kind of creating a canvas here. I don't want the die cut to go all the way through. You can read more details about this in the blog post. But basically I want to cover the whole thing with adhesive and then get them sticking together. Now I've got some masking tape. This is my 6-inch roll and I'm going to cut a piece to cover the whole front. And you can see I'm just cutting it with my scissor and then I'll adhere it to make sure that the whole front is covered. I'm going to need it for masking the background as well. So that's why I want to extend it to the edge. Now I'm going to cut the edges here just so I could see where the edge of my card is so I can center the die. So now I'm going to take my die and I'm going to place it right there in the middle and I want to make sure it does not move. So I'm going to take some surgical tape and about 3 pieces and secure it right there in the middle. I'm going to run it through my Big Shot. There's no special sandwich. So I have 2 pieces of Neenah and my masking tape. Now you can see it doesn't go all the way through and that's what I want. And my 2 pieces that are sticking together will make sure that my die cut stays inside my negative. An extra step you can take before this is to actually run your die cut with a dryer sheet through your Big Shot. And that'll make sure that it really just falls off the paper. My next step is to remove the backgrounds inside the squares only. So you can see I'm using a tweezer and it's a little bit of tedious work here to pull it all away, but I didn't have any problems with the masking tape sticking too much to the paper and tearing the paper. Now if you have fingernails, this is so much easier and I don't have any right now, I just trimmed. So it was a little harder to pull these pieces up, so I had to use my tweezers quite a bit. But it took probably about 1.5 minutes or so to get all these backgrounds removed. And you can see I'm kind of pulling them up slowly, a little piece at a time. And now here's my last piece. And now I'm going to color this with my Distress Oxide inks. Now I did a whole review on these inks last week and they're great for ink blending on paper, which is why I'm using them here, but they're also great for embossing because I'm going to clear emboss these areas. I'm using an ink foam applicator. I've got the round one because my rectangular ones are all being used by dye inks. So I had some extra round ones and I started using them with my oxide inks and they're working great. I only have 2 handles for the applicator, but I have multiple foam pads that I'm just switching out for the different colors. So you can see I'm using worn lipstick and I just covered the top there. And the nice thing about these oxide inks is that you can start in the middle of the paper, whereas with the dye inks you kind of have to worry about getting those blocks on your paper. But with this you really don't have to worry about it. And when you overlay the colors together to blend together, they just work so beautifully. And you can see I'm going back with my worn lipstick to just get a little bit more of that reddish color at the top. And so I'm just moving along here. I'm going to add a little bit more of that marmalade there. And then I'm going to move on to my fossilized amber, which I always thought was more of a dark yellow color, but the Distress Oxide actually has a pretty bright yellow color. It's really pretty. So I'm going to start with this one and use my Sukaneko actually applicator because I had it handy. It was what I started using for the fossilized amber, and it works just the same as this other foam applicator, so I wouldn't worry about buying anything new for that. So you can see how they easily go on. There are no blocks, and I'm kind of taking my time with this because it's somewhat enjoyable to do, whereas the Distress inks are kind of stressful because you never know what you're going to get. Anyway, so now I'm going to sprinkle this all with some clear embossing powder and heat it to set it because the oxide inks take quite a bit of time to dry, so there's plenty of time to get some embossing powder on there. Now I'm going to pull the background off, and at first I started pulling it off and it was tearing and it was kind of hard to do, and again I don't have my fingernails, so but once I got it going, you can see here I grabbed a piece and I got a really good hold of it and then it came off very easily, like in one big chunk. So you can see I'm kind of peeling it off a little bit at a time and staying really close to the cardstock. So my fingers are really close to the cardstock as I peel away a little bit at a time. And the reason why I'm taking the background off now is because I want to color the background but I don't want to color the actual die cut yet. So that's still the piece to be remaining here. So once I got that big piece off, I took my tweezers and I kind of spent about a minute just pulling off those extra pieces that were left. You could skip this next step, but I felt like I wanted to add a little bit of color to the background to make the white of my die cut stand out. But I just wanted a hint of color. So I got some tumbled glass distress ink and a sponge dauber, and I'm using an extremely light hand, and this is a really light color. And I'm just going over the die. Now I'm not worried about the embossed areas because that's going to resist, and then of course I still have paper over the actual stem and flowers, so I don't have to worry about that either. So I'm just making sure that I extend the color out to cover the entire die. The next step is to pull off the die itself. So this is the only piece left, and it was a little bit harder than the others, and I actually thought that clear embossing this whole thing would cause these pieces to stick together, but not at all. It wasn't a problem. So if anything, it was just a little tedious to pull this off, and some of the pieces came off in big pieces, some came off in small pieces, and to be honest with you, it took me about 5 minutes to get all these pieces off. But it was kind of fun. It's kind of like peeling a sunburn. It's kind of fun. Anyway, so once I got all those pieces off, my background is pretty much done, and it's time for a sentiment. Now I'm going to use the sentiment from this Tree Friends set by Mama Elephant, and I was really nervous about this because I spent so much time on the card. I'm doing it directly to the card. So I put it in the MISTI and I inked it up with some Hero Arts black ink. And you see how I just wiped off that ink with my finger? That sounds like a really bad idea because of my habits with touching the cardstock. So I had to be really careful after that not to touch anything. Anyway, so I trimmed also this cardstock back to 4 inches across so that I would have a little bit of a mat on the right and the left. Now I have some linen thread by Stampin' Up. It's the same color as the crumb cake cardstock, which is going to be my background. And this just adds a little bit of extra sort of something to the card, so it's not just this plain old die in the middle. So I adhered it with ATG tape runner on the back. And then I added a bow. So I'm going to work this bow here. It took me about 3 tries or so. So I'm just showing you the last try that was successful. And so I just kind of make it at the end of the linen thread and I pull it through and then I just cut it off when I'm done. I wasn't sure where I wanted to put this bow, so I sort of played around with it a little bit. At first I thought kind of toward the bottom, maybe toward the middle, but I wasn't sure I really liked that. So I decided I was just going to sort of play it out in a little bit. So what I'm going to do next is grab a piece of crumb cake cardstock, which I've cut in half and scored. And again, I like this cardstock because it matches the linen thread. And then I'm just going to put some ATG tape runner on the back and adhere it to my card base. And now I can sort of figure out where I want my bow to be. Now you can see I have that swirly thing on the right-hand side of that box toward the top. And so that sort of plays into where I'm going to put this bow. So I'm going to grab a glue dot, and at first I think I'm going to put it at the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and put my glue dot down and place it down, because sometimes you just have to try these things. You can see I'm not sure lower or middle. I decided on lower. I just had my eye just kept going kind of toward the bottom there. So I put my glue dot there, and then I stuck my bow to it. And I always use glue dots for these bows. It's so much easier than using glue. And then if you use the glue or glossy accents or something like that, it's really hard to move it if you don't like where you put it. All right, so once I put it here, I thought, no, this is too bottom heavy. I've got my sentiment, my right hand swirl from the die cut, and the bow just kind of all too close to the bottom. And once I moved my bow up to the top, then you can see I sort of have a triangle of bow, swirl, and sentiment, and stem at the bottom. And so I felt like it gave me sort of a wider area of elements, and it balanced out the card a lot better. So anyway, that's how I ended up putting this bow at the top. I thought you'd enjoy my thought process. Anyway, so here is the finished card. I really like this inlay technique with some of the areas being embossed, and the Distress Oxide inks really make this easy to do. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.